this is. Okay. This is a practice video for Chopin's Polonaise number 1. Let's start from the very beginning. Okay, so in the beginning we have this really massive octave phrase, which sounds a little frightening. So even though in the score we have fortissimo and practically every single group of those two notes marked the same way, but of course what we want to try is to build a phrase, right? And the phrase has to be clear. So you want to make sure that it comes through, even though the rhythm is very tricky. And then very important to cultivate this feeling that through the rest your thought continues. So you actually build like two big arches from here to here, and then from here to here. So all of that would not be possible without having a really bold and relaxed hands. And another thing that's important here is not to just play the chords, but play the body. So ideally, this is what you should be trying to do. Question and then answer. So everything needs to connect. And then we have the main theme. In this Polonaise, the emotions are so quickly changed one after another. So the first one is still kind of in the mood of the opening, right? And then right away it starts changing. So here the phrase is pretty tricky because you want to make sure you have this really good attention to the intonation. You don't want to play like this, although it's very tempting. You want to make sure you micromanage every intonation. And then, so you work on each of them and then you combine them into a longer thought, right? And then again, the mood changed, right? Again, it's full of questions. So, of course, it will not be possible, right, to improve without playing these hands separately. So I highly recommend to work on the right hand without pedal, of course, so you can actually micromanage your legato, your intonations. And make sure you grow without doing this, right? So it has to be very crystal clear, a nice long line. And then next thought. Make sure this also is very clear. A lot of times when you play diminuendo, we start losing the clarity of our speech, right? So it's kind of sound under the piano, right? And feels like it's not important anymore. So on the contrary, it's very important. Right? You can imagine that this is something that you say, and this is something that you think. It's important what you think. And then we continue. I'm trying to make sure that no matter what my dynamic is, whether I'm doing crescendo, I'm playing piano, my balance is really good between the hands. Right? Chopin is very inventive with his rhythm, so it starts with a triplet, right? Make sure it's a clear triplet rhythm, and then again he goes back to the 2/16 and 8 notes. Again, triplets, ornament, grace note. So all of that you have to pronounce extremely clearly, and literally not a single note can be lost here. Now let's talk a little bit about left hand, because left hand is playing a very important role. First of all, in polonaises, left hand carries on this signature rhythm, bum, ba, ba, bum, right, that you hear in the beginning. Not so easy to play, to really pronounce every single chord. And then the way Chopin writes it is with two voices. Right? The bass has its own life, own line. So we don't want to play like this. That's not what he wrote. So F sharp needs to connect to E sharp. And then E sharp needs to connect to F sharp. And then in the next measure, it's very interesting because you have to hold the D sharp. It's sustained. Now G sustained. And finally, just pretty straightforward 8 notes. So all of that, you see, it's very complex, right? And you want to make sure you pronounce everything extremely clearly. So in a way, I suggest that left hand is played so well that when you play your left hand, you feel like I don't even need my melody, right? It's already so beautiful, so gorgeous, and beautiful harmonies. So, but all of that needs to, you have to spend some time doing that. Again, do this without pedal, and then when you ready to put hands together, then the pedal also requires some attention. So you want to make sure you change pedal on each harmony. That's one harmony. Change, 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 and then again change, and change again, and then here's one harmony so you can hold. So let's make sure that each new harmony has its own brand new pedal. Very important. And also, yes, sometimes a lot of students, they have a intention, right, to pedal correctly, but they still, the foot is just a tad lazy, and so it doesn't really clear up all the way. So in this polonaise, it's so important, especially in the opening, to make sure it's everywhere, right? But here, because the harmony changes so quickly every single quarter, you want to make sure your pedal work is also impeccable. Now, just a couple of words about this melody. When you're working on the right hand alone, you really want to make sure you're interested in what you're doing. So imagine that every single note that you play is literally a reflection of your thoughts. And whether you want it or not, this is how it's going to come true. So if you don't have, a clear idea or some feeling, and a lot of times, the best thing about music is that you don't have to really know 100% what it is. If you feel it, right? If you feel it, you feel like, you're reacting to the music, that is probably enough. It's not always the case, and sometimes you want to really force yourself to search a little bit more and to ask yourself, what is this about? What kind of emotion, of thought, of idea is behind the music? So you want to make sure that when you work on this melody, you really feel something, right? So if you don't, it's gonna come through as something that's indifferent, because you were indifferent to it, right? So when you play that melody, your goal is to make sure that your fingertip is so clearly sort of hand-picked the sound that you want, right? So, and again, it's pretty mysterious and mystical, right? Because on one hand, you want to care for literally every single note, the way you're gonna touch it. It has to be very clear, but clear reflection of a thought. And the longer the thought is, the better, right? So you want to make sure. Right? What emotion is this? There's some agitation, passion, right? Wondering, not knowing something, right? But wanted to know. And it's always be careful when you go from a longer note, right? So since you hold it, even though you're going to use a pedal here, but still the note is dying, right? So you don't want to start with the accent. You want to make sure you continue. So all of this is just simply continuation of D sharp, right? Of that first D sharp. And then, and then something different. We already talked about diminuendo, right? But without losing your interest into what you're saying, what you're thinking now. Really teach your fingers to pronounce things clearly. So your thought, right, reflection of your thought is crystal clear. And then something else. There's something dreamy about this triplet, right? Something that maybe you're wondering about something. This is very similar, right? He literally uses the same notes. The only difference is that first time it reaches the A, but second time it gets to even higher note. And he marks pianissimo here, right? So you cannot really scream about that note. So it's high, I mean, it's soft, but it's very intense, right? Even based on its pitch, because now it goes into the higher notes. There's something tender about this. And then this last measure is also very important, right? It's the end of the phrase. There's a cadence here, right, that you hear. So every time when you play a cadence or just this finishing last point of the phrase, you want to make sure it has some good shape. And here, yes, we're planning to do a little bit of ritenuto, which is fine, but let's make sure that we don't lose the sharpness of the rhythm and articulation. Okay, and then we go back to the opening of the piece once again. I'm not gonna talk about it. So again, you want to make sure you have long phrase, nice arches, bold head motions, and when you play those massive chords, again, make sure there's top notes still come through. And always look into the things, ask yourself, what is hard, right? What is that? Sometimes it's just like tricky, maybe one or two notes, right? That can be, that create overall feeling that you're not doing that great. This is very difficult. So I will just spend some time, right, carefully going from note to note until you feel like you have mastered that. Okay, so now we're going to section B. All right, now section B. First, what we want to understand is what is this about, right? Does it have a clear melody? That's how it starts. It's just basically repetition of one harmony, one chord, right? But we always want to phrase it. Yes, it's not as clear melody as this. It doesn't really sing, it doesn't really speak, but because it has a certain rhythm that you want to show, right? It starts with a little syncopation, right? Syncope is when you accent a big beat, right? 1, 2, and Chopin marks it with the accent. Obviously, we don't want to play it too loud because it's marked sotto voce and you're, in a soft dynamic here. Plus, it's the beginning of the section B. To me, it sounds pretty mysterious, and it also sounds like I have a question, or maybe I'm somewhere that I've never been before. So there's something wondrous about this music. Let's make sure. So, technically speaking, we want to make sure that all the notes are together. So, because it doesn't have that clear melodic contour, we don't want it to sound like it's nothing, right? So we want to create that melodic contour and create that sense of melody, anyways, right? Then it's interesting that the arpeggio, it should not start with this F double sharp, right? A lot of people play right away, right, to the arpeggio without really paying some respect to this first note. That's not how it's written, right? The way it's written is this. And then I finish in line. So all of this together, again, we need to understand what's my phrase, right? What's the structure? So it's like this. Second intensify, right? Become more intense. And finally, the third phrase. Uncertainty that I have felt here in the beginning of this section, right? Maybe it was my fear, I was afraid. At the very end of this section, I'm gonna break through it. So just keeping that overall concept, right, when you play section B, that it definitely have this feeling of I want to overcome something. It's gonna be very helpful. Okay, now what to do? Of course, you want to treat things by elements. Of course, arpeggio, this hard arpeggios, they deserve some attention, right? So you want to come up with some, I don't know, technical ways to practice. You can practice a staccato, direct rhythm, whatever. But just a little reminder that the best way to improve this arpeggio is actually through a nice legato. Because legato is actually the quickest way to get from note to note, right? So through legato, through singing. So whatever you do, with technical exercises, make sure you still play it just slowly, right? And literally listening how one tone is going to the next tone and so forth, right? And with nice crescendo. And then you can speed things up, obviously, but I recommend that to spend some time just doing this arpeggio, doing some technical work. Now, even though it might feel like, oh, it's just nothing to really play here and just some chords, but I think it's very important to spend some time, maybe without pedal, just to really focusing on a nice vertical, right, of the chord, of the harmony, and to make sure, again, your top note is always coming through clearly. And make sure your phrasing is clear, so you're not confusing anywhere by playing like this, right? So it's first accent and then crescendo. So there's always sense of growth, right, that happens through those chords that we want to show in our playing. Now let's move on, and we will start again from these outbursts and then all of a sudden music changes again. In this Polonaise there's so many sudden changes, so we want to make sure that you want to imagine that the whole piece at this moment is hanging on one note, on that D sharp. So this note definitely deserves some good attention. Don't lose the intensity. This is very beautiful melody. It's a little bit naive. Maybe it's some memories from the childhood. Something that is just so simple, right, and so sincere. So we don't want to overdo anything here, but we want to make sure and to create a good sound, right? Obviously it should play legato, although it has the rhythm of tam ta ta tam, still have the rhythm of the Polonaise, right? Which you can show if you want to. So here really spend some time just playing the right hand, and very patiently you want to really listen how imagine if it's one tone or one sound, how this one tone is moving from D sharp to A. Now it lives there, now it goes to G sharp. So I guess the first couple of ideas here is make sure there is no accents, right? So we don't want to no accents, no mechanical feel. We don't want that too. We really want this to be a singer. Somebody sings, maybe just going through a forest singing a nice folk melody, right? So you need to make sure to teach your fingers to sing. See, I did a little bit of accent here. That was not good. So if I would practice this, my best friend would be my ear, right? So it would control everything. And then another best friend is my fingertip, of course, right? So if I want to create something that is beautiful, right, I want to make sure I don't just, you know, randomly press into the key. I want to hand pick my sound, so to speak, right? So make sure my fingertip is engaged. And I play without any accents. End of the phrase. Next phrase. Now it has nice ornamental melody, right? So we want to make sure it doesn't all of a sudden turn into, right, something like this that you show your brilliant fingers, but no, it needs to stay in the same kind of character, right? Right, with informative sound, but still singing through. And then that's beautiful when left hand goes, I mean not left hand, but right hand goes into the middle register, cello. This measure number 49, is actually very tricky, right? So let's make sure we have this trill. This trill is a little bit tricky. And then this change. You know, a good performer would always show how you go from A to G and to E, right? So we need to just bring those out and have more clarity here. And obviously, better pedal changes here. Change pedal because harmony, and then change again. And then, miraculously, we hear again the first melody that we just heard in the very beginning of the piece. Like it just comes like a memory from nowhere. Section B is actually comes from section A. Maybe you play less intensely, right? Less real. Like a memory, with crystal clear pedaling at the end of B. I'm actually glad that it comes back because I forgot to talk about this difficulties in left hand, right? All this arpeggiato is super tough to play. When you're dealing with something that is technically difficult, you want to actually solve it with a little bit of love, right? Not conquer it, not like this. To really hear and to teach your hand to kind of be like fish in the water in this difficult waters, but still it's like, I'll make it my own. And how to do it? You have to spend some time, right, going through each of those. This is not hard. This is difficult. This is difficult. We don't want left hand to take over here. But I think it actually will. If you don't solve those difficulties, we will always hear, we always feel that left hand is struggling here. So we have to solve those struggles. And then, you know, the melody will shine through beautifully here. So spend some time, again, not conquering this, but teaching your arm to be more familiar with it, and your finger, right, to sort of hug those. Right, and hearing this. Exactly is the priority here, right? That also will help you. All right, moving to section C, the most beautiful section maybe on this Polonaise, although they are very gorgeous. All right, so section C is maybe heaven on earth, maybe heaven in heaven, but there's something heavenly about it for sure. It's marked benemoso, but con anima, right? So a little bit slower, but still with soulful music. It's gorgeous. not a bad idea, depending on the piano that you're playing on. Make sure that your melody is crystal clear and it's not muffled, right? So we want to make sure that if I'm using soft pedal, then my fingertip is working 150%, right? So the key to this section is actually quite simple, right, to understand, but very hard to achieve, right, through your practice. You want to make sure you have amazing balance every single step of the way, between the melody and many voices, right? It has roughly about 4 voices that you have to deal with, but number one, and that's a queen above all of them, right? It's the melody. So melody, it's not enough just to bring it up, right? You have to also build something with it. Again, it's difficult for a number of reasons. Reason number one is tempo, right? It's slow. So then how am I supposed to connect this F sharp to this E? And create the illusion that this F sharp is still flowing, right? Especially on our instruments, right? So you want to make sure, first rule here, every single note that is longer than a quarter or longer, we always want to create this feeling of this inner crescendo, right? And if I don't create that feeling inside of me, the melody will constantly die, right? Right here. So it's just not gonna work. So this is the first rule, and since this piece is full of those quarter notes, dotted quarter note, occasional half notes, that's just gonna be the best idea that you can apply. Just kind of imagine that sound still vibrates, right? So I still create my this feeling of crescendo, very important. So let's work a little bit on just the melody alone. I suggest that at least one time you just play through the melody without any worrying about other voices. One time a day. Let's go on, but talk about other things. So again, we have those kind of ornamentation, right? Those fast notes. Again, just like we mentioned in the previous section, it shouldn't get out of the character, right? So again, if my character overall, it's very lyrical, it's beautiful, it's almost like it's not real, right? It's dreamy. But again, it's very dear to my heart. It's the song of my heart, right? I want to make sure that all of this faster notes, they play just with that feeling. Now, I'm actually happy that Chopin does not write piano here. All he writes is meno mosso con anima, and that's it. Basically, the dynamics in the beginning is not marked. So it's great because I want to make sure that your melody is kind of it should operate on like on the same on a different level, right? Not on a dynamic level. Melody is melody. It has to be projected. What kind of dynamic it is, if it's mezzo forte, I don't know, maybe it's almost forte, mezzo piano, it almost doesn't matter as long as you project it, right? So every note, what means sound projection, right? That I create the sound, right? I have a feeling that I created. It has a shape, right? Shape, right? It's clear. I like to think of this as a round and a rich sound, right? And there's some difference between this playing, right? I create nothing, right? In order for me to create and project, it requires a lot more energy from me, right, as a performer. So we want to make sure that we have that feeling that every single note that I play here in this section is created, projected, right? And think about rich and round terms. So, for example, we can start from, just as I said, playing through only the melody, right? Just to really enjoy and really get familiar with just this melodic contour. Then I highly recommend that you just kind of bring elements together step by step. So maybe the next step should be playing right hand, but now adding this beautiful voice. And I always like to think of this voice as a heartbeat of that melody, right? It's just like our heartbeats. We don't hear it, but we know it is, hopefully, right? We have a heartbeat. So same here. You don't have to bring, you should not bring this up at all. But you should still give it some character. Just to think, oh, I just need to play this quiet. It's not enough, right? You still have to be generous enough with your ideas, and still give it some color. Harmonies change practically every single quarter, and actually here I just played what we need to. Right, if you use it well here, then it has to be extremely light, not deep pedal, and also he marks dolcissimo. So be careful not to overpower here. So next step would be to play just right hand as written. Maybe once without pedal still, maybe once with pedal, but just to make sure I'll play from different places. You can hear your projected melody, but you also not ignoring that secondary voice, right? That's underneath. This is one of the most gorgeous melodies. We need to do the same round of work for left hand, and left hand probably you should just play as written from the beginning, and we want to make sure again everything is balanced, right? All those intervals are perfectly together, and again the best way is not to think, oh, I have to be quiet, everything has to be together. That's all good, but also think about this character. Maybe it's whispering, or they very attentively listening to the voice of the right hand, right? With admiration, again without any accents, right? Nothing like this. And a lot of times here in this piece, left hand have those special measures where there'll be a lot of harmonic changes. For example, here measure 54. Chopin writes it in with such a clear intention that it needs to be brought up. Right, that's chromatic. And look how beautifully, right, it reaches this E flat, right? So we want to bring this up, and see, the idea for practice is that to really understand the complexity of both parts, right? Whatever parts right hand's playing and left hand's playing, and to really work on them separately. And then another practice step is to put them together. You can do it without pedal, but your basket is already full, right? So to speak. So you already know how you should be playing right hand. You worked on it. How you should be playing left hand. When you put it together, make sure all of those good things that you worked for, when you address each hand separately, it stays, right? So again, you want to, now you just have to manage more. End of the phrase, new phrase. long because of the tempo. 4-bar phrases, and let's make sure that in each phrase, it's nice to mark them so you literally know, oh, this is the beginning of the phrase, this is the middle of the phrase. In each phrase, we want to make sure we have beginning, development, and ending. This is like the most standard phrase. Of course, there could be some differences, different type of phrasing, but this is actually pretty typical, and pretty much this is what Chopin is doing here. Now, in this section, we have something special, right? Special moment where all of a sudden we go from heaven to earth. So now the main part is played by left hand. You can imagine cello is playing, right? But most importantly, you need to understand what we play about. It's lonely, right? If we talk about heaven in the beginning of my dreams, now I realize that, you know, they're just dreams. They don't exist. And, I'm not happy. I'm lonely, and something is, something troubles my soul. It sounds pretty dark, especially here. And see, both phrases here, he finishes the same way. So it almost like maybe it's a question that that tortures me, that right doesn't let me, doesn't leave me. So we want to bring that kind of sound, right, very deep, where I can hear every note, and we need to create a feeling of some resistance. It shouldn't be like this. You cannot fly through those notes with ease. It's somebody's pain, maybe your own, right? So it should be hard to go through this. And then I love that here sometimes we can hear comforting notes from right hand. Maybe it says, I'm here with you, but left hand go on. Fascinated by these 3 notes here, because this is something that Neuhaus, this legendary Soviet artist teacher, he said this is the most fascinating parts of the piece. It's called, he used to call them turn, like it's a turn. When I go from one emotion to something different. Something that I see, it's coming, and maybe it's good, or maybe it's I have more hope here, but it's coming from far away. A little bit closer. But this chromatic scale, it ruins everything. It ruins my hope, right? Again, I'm falling into the despair. So actually, it's very complex, this whole separate section, right? Very complex in its emotions. There are a lot of things going on. And our job as performers, we want to react to it, right? And then melody stays, again, comes back to cello, right? Left hand. Right hand helps. This time I just tell myself, it's almost not, it sounds the same but not the same, right? It's in a more realized way. It's I just maybe say myself, no matter what, I will still dare to dream my dream, right? So there should be some differences in the way you will play it. So, you know, wrapping up the talk about this section, when in this where melodies in lower register, of course, it has to be practiced hand separately as well. Right hand, even though it's just easy to think about, oh, it's just accompaniment, and left hand is a solo. Actually, right hand has its own melody. And it almost feels like it's a little lost. It's just like, where am I? Trying to find the way. Again, a little comforting moment. So we want to discover the main melody in right hand, obviously in left hand, and we want to give them good sound, good shape, and project, right? And then learning how to put these hands together. More practice without pedal, it always helps to really see what your finger is doing, right? Without covering, because pedal makes everything very pretty. But then in these Polonaise, the paddling actually is pretty artful, like it's an art, right? It's a battle here, well, because there's so many harmonic changes. So it's important to practice this with pedal as well, so you can actually work on it, right? To make sure we're clearing up and clearing enough, right? So the sound that all the beauty that we try to create is not gonna cover with unclean pedal. So just maybe a special block of your practice when you play things, you play it with pedal, maybe slower, and just really make sure you are focusing on clearing things up. Okay, I hope this was helpful.